Let's talk now to Chris Philp, Shadow Leader of the House of Commons. Chris, very good morning to you.
Good morning, good morning.
Nice to see you, good to talk to you. Big story this morning for me is, where's Keir Starmer? He doesn't seem to have been seen since about last Thursday when he was at the United Nations. Any idea?
I'm afraid I've got no idea at all. I can tell you he certainly hasn't popped up at the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham, but I haven't seen him anywhere else either, so your guess is as good as mine.
Well, I mean, it's about time he came out and said something about what is going on in the world, because, of course, we've got the Middle East kind of on the brink of all sorts of nastiness. I mean, there are those who disagree with what Israel are doing. I'm not one of those, but, I mean, you'd think that he might have something to say. David Lammy as well, who's been very vocal about Israel. He's been very vocal at the UN, very vocal about, you know, pulling military aid to Israel in as much as he can. It just seems very mysterious to me.
Well, it is unusual to witness a period of silence by David Lammy. It's rather uncharacteristic, but hopefully you and your colleagues in the media will be able to smoke them both out before long.
Yes, well, absolutely right. Let's talk a bit about Conservative Party policy, perhaps. I mean, front page of the Times today, Chris, a subject that you will be familiar with, which is that, you know, the Labour Party have discovered that the migrant problem, the illegal migrant problem, is a bigger problem than they thought. They've got about 30,000 migrants currently being housed in 250 hotels up and down the country. They don't seem to think they can move them for about 3 years. I mean, would you say that it's fair to say that this party, who are now in government, came into government saying they were fully prepared to govern, came into government saying everything was fully costed, saying they knew what they were doing, they were going to move them out of hotels, they were going to stop the boats, they were going to smash the gangs? They haven't really done anything when it comes to the migrant problem at all, have they?
Yeah, I think that is a fair characterisation. In this area, as in others, they've got no plan at all. And, you know, they're clearly not gripping this whatsoever. The one initiative, the one project that was on the blocks that could have stopped the boats, and I think would have stopped the boats, the Rwanda scheme, they cancelled as soon as they got into office. The first plane was due to take off on July the 24th, and I believe the deterrent effect of that would have stopped the boats. We saw it work in Australia about 10 years ago, where they had a similar project. They called it Sovereign Borders, which completely stopped the boats coming to Australia then. We saw it work with the Albanian cohort across the Channel, where a returns agreement a year or two ago reduced the number of Albanians coming over by 93%. So I think the Rwanda scheme, the deterrent effect would have worked here, as it did in those other two examples, but they cancelled it, and that's left them with essentially no plan at all. Of course, the last government as well was going after the gangs. That's not a new idea, but I think as their own new border security czar himself said, on its own, that is not enough. It's not going to work, and that is why they're going to have all of these people in hotels. It's going to cost the taxpayer billions of pounds, and they are failing to control our border. It was deeply, deeply irresponsible of Keir Starmer and the Labour government to cancel the Rwanda scheme with no alternative plan in place, and that is why we see the chaos that you just referred to.
But, I mean, that seems to be the hallmark of this new government. You know, they've cancelled all the new oil and gas licences in the North Sea. Yesterday, they just cancelled basically the last final kind of steel furnace in Britain, in Port Talbot, shutting it down. They're cancelling all manner of projects that they don't like the look of, for ideological reasons, it seems to me. They're charging VAT to public schools, which they don't really think is actually going to make them any money. They're just doing it because they want to. They're taking away the pension fuel benefit for pensioners. I mean, it's just unbelievable what they're doing, and they don't seem to be really facing any objections from you guys for it.
Well, it's obviously a shocking litany of failure, as you say, and it's why Keir Starmer's approval rating has plummeted, I think, faster than any other Prime Minister following a general election. He's gone down to about minus 26% for all of the reasons you just mentioned, and one of those you picked out, cancelling the oil and gas licences in the North Sea. Yeah, it does mean that heating bills will go up as a result, because we're going to have to import the gas from places like Qatar, which is more expensive because you've got to transport it. And it means we're going to make less tax revenue, and it's going to destroy jobs, particularly in the northeast of Scotland, but elsewhere too, which are dependent on extracting oil and especially gas from the North Sea. So a whole litany of terrible mistakes that they've made. Obviously, we in the Conservatives are going to a leadership election. We individual shadow ministers like me are holding the government to account, as we're doing on this interview and as I do in the House of Commons as shadow leader. But I think when we have our new leader in place, we will take the fight to a new level. I'm personally backing Kemi Badenoch, as you may know, because I think she has the energy and the dynamism, the charisma, the star quality to really cut through. And she is someone who I think articulates very well the case against the Labour government, but also the positive case that she's developing for conservatism to, help small businesses by rolling back excessive regulation. So, I think after this leadership election, we will, and I hope it'll be Kemi that's leading us, we will certainly be taking the fight to Labour, who have done, I could not imagine on July the 4th, on the election day, they would do such a bad job in government. And we haven't even talked about the freebies from Lord Ali that Keir Starmer, and it would appear pretty much every other senior Labour politician, has been helping themselves to, from luxury stays in a penthouse to designer clothes to sunglasses to clothes for Lady Victoria, his wife. It's astonishing while they're cutting benefits for pensioners who are barely above the poverty line. It's a shocking and disgraceful record. No wonder his opinion poll ratings have gone down so far.
Absolutely right. I mean, Robert Jenrick was caught out on the weekend as well, because he had taken £75,000 from a company which was described by Trevor Phillips as possibly not entirely what it looked like. But I mean, Robert Jenrick made out, and I don't think he did it that well, but I mean, I would have made a better case for him to say that, he takes money as a donation, for his campaign genuinely, and if you put money into a campaign, that happens all the time. But the difference, I think, it seems to be between the Labour Party and the Tory Party is that, these were personal donations made to individual MPs. I mean, have you ever had money offered to you like that as an MP?
No, for clothes. I mean, no one has ever even suggested buying me. I mean, this suit I bought myself with my own money, obviously, like any normal person would do. And if I wore spectacles, then I'd expect to buy them myself. And no one's ever put me up in a luxury penthouse or, offered to buy clothes for my family. I mean, these are extraordinary things they've done. And yes, there is a difference, of course, between funding a political party for campaigning purposes versus providing like suits and clothes and holidays, which seems to have happened with Sir Keir Starmer and most of his senior team. I think one of them had a birthday party. Bridget Phillips had a 40th, or two. One wasn't enough. She had two 40th birthday parties paid for by Lord Ali and Wahid Ali, and he appears to have been given preferential access as a result. He got a Downing Street pass, which he shouldn't have been given, and apparently he's been advising them on appointments. So it's not just that Lord Ali or Wahid Ali has given them all this money. He seems to have had influence, significant influence, at the heart of the Labour government as a result of the donations he made. And the fact this is all happening at the same time the Labour government are slashing winter fuel payments for pensioners, earning as little as like £12,000 a year, which is about half the minimum wage level. I think that really upsets people. I mean, understandably.
It does.
And there's also the hypocrisy, because in opposition there's the hypocrisy. In opposition, Keir Starmer sort of clothed himself in this mantle of sanctimonious superiority, criticising Boris Johnson and making out that he was some sort of kind of paragon of rectitude. And yet now it turns out Wahid Ali was funding all these things for him at the same time.
Yeah, just going back to Kemi Badenoch, she's on the front page of the Times today following her statement about maternity leave and whether or not it was over the top, whether it was excessive, saying that she knows how Margaret Thatcher felt, who was always consistently misquoted by saying there's no such thing as society. I mean, do you have some sympathy for her? Do you think she made a bit of a mistake there by bringing that into the argument, because it kind of dominated the day yesterday?
Well, I think Margaret Thatcher is an example that we can all, I think, learn from. She was a great Prime Minister, and actually I think Kemi Badenoch has the potential to follow in Margaret Thatcher's footsteps, which is one of the reasons I'm supporting her. Her general point, Kemi Badenoch's general point about reducing the burden of regulation and the burden of taxation on business, particularly small businesses, which are the lifeblood of our economy, is a good point, because over time, and we're not talking obviously specifically about maternity pay, which should be protected, but the overall burden of regulation over time has built up and built up and built up, and it is making it very hard to do business in this country. Yet it is businesses, small and large, who create jobs, create prosperity, pay the taxes that fund the NHS and so on, and it has got to the point now, and this is the fault of both parties in the past, that regulation is stifling us as a country. I mean, to give you a couple of examples, the new nuclear power station that's being built here is more expensive per megawatt hour than any other nuclear power station anywhere in the world. High-speed rail lines in this country cost more per mile than any other developed Western country because of all the gold-plated environmental regulations, building tunnels for badgers and all that kind of thing. There's whole swathes of the country where you can't build any houses at all because of this nutrient neutrality moratorium that we did try to get rid of in government, but Labour voted it down in the Lords. There's another example, the Lower Thames Crossing, a tunnel under the Thames. We spent so far about £300 million on planning documents. I think in one of the Nordic countries, either Denmark or Norway, they built an entire tunnel, the longest in the world, for less money than the UK has spent on the planning documents.
Yes.
So loads of examples there of the practical impact of letting all this regulation build up. And each individual bit of regulation on its own terms might appear to have some merit, but the cumulative effect built up over years is stifling, and that's what I think Kemi and Conservatives, if we get back into government, would seek to roll back.
Well, the other nightmare, I know from personal experience of that tunnel that they're building currently, is that they close the current tunnel, the Blackwall tunnel, sort of every second week in one direction or the other, which completely gridlocks the entire area of southeast London and makes it practically impossible to drive anywhere around that part of the world. And the idea that they're building a new tunnel which is going to come up and on both sides of the river where there's already quite a lot of congestion, is just going to make it worse anyway, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I'm generally a fan of building new infrastructure, and sticking in an additional tunnel should ease the congestion you're mentioning that backs up, I think, down the A2 as you approach the tunnel from the southeast.
Yeah, I don't think it will, though, because it's going into a similar sized road on the other side of the river. So, unless they expand that, it's still going to be backed up, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously you need to build the arterial road capacity and the entrance and exit from the new tunnel as well. But I think the more we build infrastructure generally, whether it's road, rail, power generation, whatever it may be, that is better for the economy and better for the country. But often these rules and regulations make it so hard and expensive to do. I mean, Crossrail, again, is a good project. I fully support it as a London MP, but it took too long and it cost too much. And one of the reasons for those overruns, cost overruns and time overruns, was all the regulation that makes it so unnecessarily complicated. And we can definitely make things quicker and simpler and ease the burden on business, big and small.
Well, that would be nice. Chris, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Chris Philp, the shadow leader of the House of Commons, who's back in Kemi Badenoch.